Spiritual preparedness is the theme I chose for today, and meaning something different, not surprisingly, than what you usually probably hear about spiritual preparedness. A lot of traditional language around spiritual preparedness talks about sort of trying to avert some coming calamity. You know, if you died tonight, do you know where you'd go? Schmidt and Bartel would be my answer. But I mean it in a different sort of way. And this agricultural metaphor that Jesus uses in the parable is I think, really helpful. And I mean spiritual preparedness in the sense that there's a certain amount of conditioning or preparing the soil or getting ready that has to occur really over a long period of time before you notice much difference in yourself. And spiritual preparedness is what spiritual practice is about. And Aaron's friend Laura was tilling her garden with an auger bit that goes into a hand drill, which, and so when she hit something and the bit stopped, the drill didn't stop, and so it was her ring finger, thank goodness, because otherwise, you know, she'd been saying, look at my injured finger, which she does to me sometimes anyway, but it was her ring finger that was black and blue from the base of it almost to the tip. I mean, it was quite swollen because that's what the drill caught when it kept turning because the bit wouldn't turn. But that's even a metaphor for the way some people go about spiritual preparedness. It's sort of this violent, in their minds quite powerful in the sense of being quite aggressive. And by God, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And I'm going to be there. Whether it's the Ignatian exercises, which if you don't know about them, that's a good thing. Or, I mean, some people love them to death. But the Ignatian exercises are an example of the idea that if you just follow these steps, you'll get there. And for some people, they work really well. And for people like me, who don't really have much use for authority, they don't work so well because I get down the steps. I got a questionnaire from the people at Social Security, and one of the questions was, do you have problems with authority? And my answer was, have you ever been fired from a job because of your problems with authority? And I said, yes, I have problems with authority, but I can fake it. So I don't do well with step-by-step progressions, because I look at the step-by-step and I say, well, why does it have to be this way? And so people who ask why too much don't do well with step-by-step progressions. On the other hand, some people go through them like, you know, a bull through a china shop. It works great. I know people who have done Teresa of Avila, done the interior castle work. And then they do this really deep, this really deep work, and they start to get these, what some people think are psychological symptoms or psychiatric symptoms because they're doing the work. And since most of the world isn't really trained to respond appropriately to that, you know, they'll end up at their doctor for something, and the doctor will say, how are you doing? And they say, well, I feel this way, this way, and this way. And the doctor thinks, oh my God, I have to hospitalize you. And in fact, it's just that they're going through this spiritual progression. Other people look for shortcuts. Get this CD. All you need to do is listen to this CD, and it will get you to this advanced meditative state. And the truth is, it might, but you won't stay there. When the CD ends, you'll come back. It's analogous to what Ram Dass says about psychedelics, that they get you to this place where, from an Eastern perspective, you do see truths about yourself. But the problem for him was he couldn't stay there. He'd come back down off the substance, and now he's still back to where he is, and he insights anymore, and it's ultimately what motivated his trip to the East. It was, how can I find somebody who's there and who stays there and can teach me how to stay there? And it's one of the things in the West that's never really translated, the idea of spiritual preparedness, never really translated from the monastery to the parish. And it was thought for a long time to be the exclusive purview of the professionals, you know. And the common people weren't ready for it and couldn't handle it. And they'd only become confused, you know. We don't want to confuse the poor dumb people in the pew. And so we save it for the professional. And you might guess that I don't buy that. But I do. So I know it's part of my authority issue. But there is some truth, I think, that the average person is impatient because so much of commercial pop spirituality says you can do this sort of thing. Yeah. Follow this procedure, get this CD, watch these DVDs, and what happens is you end up seeing people like a certain popular spiritual teacher from Germany, whose name we won't say, but whose initials are the same as the guy who needed to E.T. Who talks about his self-identified awakening, and when you listen to his description of his awakening, it sounds very much like an anxiety disorder that resolved, which is a great thing. I mean, it's great news. But if you've been plagued by recurring thoughts and ruminative thought patterns, and there's always been stuff going on in your mind even when you sat still, and all of a sudden you get to a place where that doesn't happen, that's not enlightenment, it's called not being anxious. But we're so eager to grab on to some status, some goal, some place, that he says, oh, I am awakened now. And he starts writing books, right? And people think, oh great, this guy must know how to get me the shortcut to where I want to be, so I'll read these books, and then, what a surprise, they don't get there. Because they've got the drill and the auger, and yet it's not quite as safe as maybe a pitchfork or a shovel, especially in a space that isn't, and the space isn't large enough to rent a tiller. You know, so, which I don't know if you ever, a tiller is a whole other thing. A tiller is like attacking the spiritual journey very aggressively, because it's the gardening equivalent of riding the bucking bronco, and what you're going to.
Yeah, groups had to do that yesterday.
Yeah, it's not, and maybe it's an apt metaphor, you know, it isn't smooth, you know, but we love, in the West, to have a goal, and we're going to reach the goal, and we're going to achieve the goal, and we're going to get the certificate, and we're going to put it in the frame, and we'll slap it up on our wall, and now we've arrived, and now we don't have to worry about it. Except that it doesn't work that way. Except that the minute you get to a place where you think you have a destination, you start rushing hell-bent toward the destination instead of doing the preparing of the ground. Some years ago now, Chogyam Trungpa wrote a little book. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick, but it's only, you know, it's like half of this page. You know, it's one of those. So it's not a very long book, but it was called The Path is the Goal. And trying to get people to see that the point isn't the destination, it's the work of preparedness. And I like what Ram Dass says about mantra, because mantra has certainly worked for me in that regard. That what you're doing is you're just constantly preparing the soil. And the reason you're preparing the soil is that the seed won't go into the soil unless it's been prepared. In those years you've had droughts, if you look at the ground, you just know there's cracks in the ground, and I suppose you could throw seed in there, but nothing's going to happen. And if you watch an experienced gardener, it looks like they're just throwing the seeds in the ground. My mother used to go plant lettuce, you know, and she'd dig this little furrow, and then she'd take a ruler out, because the package said that it had to be 1/8 of an inch deep or whatever it was. And she'd stick the ruler in a little row, and our neighbor Elmer Putchell would walk out, and he'd have his garden all prepared, and he'd take his finger, he'd go like this, lettuce, he'd go boom, get the lettuce seed, smooth it over. You know, her lettuce would look like pretty sad, and his lettuce would be, you know, 3 feet tall down here, because he just knew what to do and did it with that confidence and comfort of somebody who was experienced and knew what they were doing. And so, that's so true of the spiritual journey. It's not about getting there. In fact, I'm even starting to question, in my own mind, whether enlightenment is a permanent state. Because the Eastern traditions teach that everything is impermanent, except enlightenment. So, do we get to the place where all of a sudden we're living 24/7 in this state? Do we know anybody who does that? I mean, that we personally met. The Dalai Lama, maybe. But I don't know. I've never sat down with him. And
Father Graf.
who's that?
Father Graf. John.
Yeah, but if you really lived in that state,
That's true.
24/7,
Why would you?
why would you leave the house?
Good.
You know? I mean, I think you can dwell in there much of the time. And I'm even willing to say I think there are times when voluntarily you come out of that to interact. But if we want to buy that in full awakening is a place where we see everything as it is, there's nothing we need, because we understand everything as it is, and we're perfectly content to let things be as they are, I don't know that most of us can handle that. I think a lot of us would have some very human need to still do work in social justice, to still do work to relieve the suffering of our brothers and sisters. And so maybe my problem is more with what enlightenment has been said to be. But I do know this: as long as we're driving towards that goal, we'll never get there. It's one of the great ironies of life. And the point is the journey. The point is what happens along the way. Did you ever notice it takes much longer to get home than it takes to get there when you're going on a trip? Getting home takes longer. Getting home is a son of a bitch. Going there, it's fine. Why? Because you're noticing everything. You're taking it in. You're excited about where you're going, but look at all this neat stuff we're seeing along the way. Coming home is, I just want to get there. I'm tired, I'm cranky, the vacation is over, and I just want to get there. And so it seems like it takes forever. Spiritual preparedness says, can we live life like we're on the way to the destination? Because we are. Can we not want to speed it up, not want to slow it down, just take it for what it is? Do the work, accept that there's no shortcuts. Find some practice that we enjoy and can live in it, and we're actually going to do it. Doesn't really matter what it is, just as long as we do it. And forget about, for that one period of our day, it's probably the only period we will, goal-based thinking. And just be a human being instead of a human doing.